welcome. Clearly, this is our first RealTalk Virtua Women's Health Chat via Zoom. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My name is Bridget Reuter, and I am part of the, oh, there goes my phone, my house phone. I'm part of the Virtua marketing team, and I want to congratulate you for carving out this time tonight to invest in your health and your well-being. Dr. Hunt, thank you for joining us. I have to confess, I have been stuffing my stress and anxiety down with lots of cookies and brownies over the last 3 months. So this is a perfect session for us on Step Away from the Pantry, tips to outsmart emotional eating on lockdown. So thank you very much for joining us. There's a lot happening in my house right now. Before we get started, I do want to go over just a few things about our webinar format. You don't have to worry about being on camera or the dog barking in the background. Only Dr. Hunt and I have to worry about that because your camera and your microphone are disabled. We will have a few opportunities for you to be part of the conversation during the presentation. It's a fun way for you to contribute to the conversation. So you'll see poll questions that will pop up on your screen. Just click your answer, and that will help us keep this interactive. There will be time at the end for questions. You'll see on your screen now that there's an arrow pointing to where you can submit questions. At any point in the presentation, you can just type a question in, and at the end, Dr. Hunt will answer as many questions as she can. And keep in mind that your questions and your poll responses are all anonymous. So it looks like our screen is working again, so why don't we get started? It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michelle Hunt. She is a clinical psychologist with Virtua Health's medical and surgical weight loss programs. She has more than 20 years of experience in guiding patients through eating disorders, addictions, and weight loss and wellness. So please, Dr. Hunt, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe this is appropriate for our discussion. We're talking about stress and anxiety. That just heightened my stress level a little bit, not having this tech stuff work out. Just when you think you have things figured out, then sure enough, it fails. So I'm glad to talk with you about this important topic tonight. I congratulate you for taking the time for yourself and making some time to work on your goals. So it might be a little tricky for me not being in control of those slides, so I might have to tell Dina when to flick them. Is that okay, Dina? Hopefully, yes. So I wanted to start out by saying this topic is really important. I've been hearing not only my patients talking about this, but my friends and my coworkers and my family members, everyone saying that they're struggling with this issue. So I've heard some of my patients talking about now, instead of the freshman 15, they're talking about the COVID-19. So hopefully that people are not gaining that amount of weight, but we want to sort of give you some tips and practical things that you can take with you to, deal with this issue more effectively. All right, so we're going to start out on the first slide.
Dr. Hunt,
yeah.
I hate to interrupt. Is there any chance you could move a little bit closer to your microphone? You're sounding a little bit echoey and far away.
Sure, again, that's something that works good in our tech. How's that? Is that better?
A little bit better. You just sound a little bit far away.
I cannot get any closer. How's that?
Just maybe project.
Okay.
There we go. That's better.
All right. Excellent. So we're starting off by talking about anxiety. We all know what stress is. We all know what anxiety is. So in this, for the purpose of this discussion, we're defining stress as environmental things that are triggering our anxiety. And we're defining anxiety as the response to the stressors. So if we think about what anxiety actually is, it's the combination of our thoughts about whatever the stress is, combined with our physiological reaction to it. Okay, so you often hear this referred to as the fight or flight. So really our thoughts and our worry go together with precipitating that body reaction. And we'll talk about how this is important as we go along. So anxiety is synonymous with fear, essentially. And think about that on a continuum where, you know, we're not always walking around when we feel anxious in a state of panic, but however that operates on a continuum, you know, from a lower anxiety level to a full-blown panic. And two of the things that tend to trigger anxiety or exacerbate it, make it worse, is when we feel a sense of loss of control or when the future is unknown. So needless to say, we're in a time where these two things seem to really be going on, right? Okay. So our normal responses to anxiety and stress are usually that fight or flight kind of thing. So now we have little opportunity to really be fighting this virus, right? Unless we're someone who's working on developing one of the cures for it. And we can't really run away from it. In fact, we're being asked to stay in our houses. So problem solving is another way that we often respond to anxiety. And in this case, many of our problem solving strategies that we would normally do are not available to us, or even if they are, there's not really anything we can do to actually change the situation. We might also, in response to anxiety, seek comfort with our safe people. We all have people who we feel more comfortable around, and many of those people are just not available to us right now. We can't even get to them when we need them. So that can also heighten people's anxiety. And then in response to what's going on with the pandemic, there's a whole bunch of associated stressors that are happening as well. Some of those might be people have financial issues, being out of work. Is my job going to be there when I get back? Is my company going to still be in business? Housing issues related to that. And then when we talk about access to necessities, so this has kind of evolved over time throughout this pandemic. There were certain food items initially not available, or things like toilet paper, stuff like that. Now it's maybe access to meat. I know that someone in my family had some difficulty. She was unable to get distilled water for her sleep apnea machine, her CPAP machine. So things like that. These are things that are additional stressors. We also have not only concerns about our own health, but also the people that we care about. Maybe we have family members or people we know in a nursing home. And then by safety concerns, I also mean that sometimes people who we know and care about live in situations where they might be, it's not the best of circumstances. They may be more prone towards being a victim of domestic violence or child abuse kinds of situations. And these, we know that stress exacerbates those kinds of concerns within families. So being quarantined is, I've been thinking about that, it's kind of like being grounded by Mother Nature. And I've experienced a lot of mixed feelings, and I'm sure that many people out there as well have, and this is what I'm hearing from the people that I talk to. Maybe a sense of anger, rebellion, like not wanting to follow what the recommendations are, combined with some pleasure at having the less hectic schedules, and maybe even being alone felt good in the beginning, but now as time goes on, maybe you're not liking it. You know, so this sense of mixed emotion. People are also feeling sadness and grief. Maybe you've lost someone, know someone who's passed away from the virus, and also grief at not only losses of lives, but also losses of events and things that you expected to happen that didn't end up happening, all of that stuff. Boredom as well. So in the end, we're asking ourselves, how did this happen? How long is it going to last? When is it, what are things going to be like later? Again, all of these unknowns. One way of coping with stress is eating. that's why we're here tonight, to talk about that. And a lot of our positive ways that we maybe used to cope with eating are now not available to us, because social distancing is one, but maybe also that we're not able to just get out there and do the things that were our coping strategies. Maybe, having additional time on our hands becomes too much time on our hands, if you know what I'm trying to say with that. And even if you're not someone that typically goes to food for coping, you might be using this strategy now, because maybe you've exhausted all of those other things. And also during times of extreme stress, we're also more likely to revert back to the old stuff that worked. So maybe you've moved away from emotional eating, but now that's kind of come back into the picture. And we're also living in this world where we're just being re-exposed all of the time to images and things that are upsetting. So it really promotes a sense of helplessness about the situation. And helplessness is one of the main features of trauma as well. So not only are we experiencing stress and anxiety, but many people will experience this as a traumatic event. And we're going to just do a little, I'm sorry, I don't have my notes, so they're not on my screen. So I was supposed to tell us that we're having a little survey. And so I want to ask you, how has your food consumption changed during the lockdown? Has it been the same, changed a little, or changed a lot, if you would answer the poll? We'll just kind of see what our audience is thinking. Okay, well, that's good news that the majority of our audience, I don't know if that means that you were already doing it before. It may mean that. So changed a little could mean that it's increased. It could mean it probably hasn't gone down if you're listening to this webinar. Okay, so, for many people, their food consumption has changed. And what I wanted to say in the beginning, but I was thrown off with not having my notes and the way that the anxiety of the way this presentation started, I wanted to say that one thing that is really similar to the freshman 15 and the COVID-19 is that it's a period of adjustment. And when things in life change and when there's adjustments, that is when our eating patterns can change. And we also are quite distracted from what would be our normal ways of coping. So we may be being less mindful and paying less attention to our eating habits. Okay, so a lot of times when I talk with people about this topic, they talk about why is it food? Why do we go to food? And so there's a lot of good reasons for this. We go to food because it is essential for survival. It's a pre-programmed function that we know how to do. We've been rehearsing eating for a very long time, right? And we are meant to relax and feel good when we eat. This motivates us to keep eating, and if we enjoy our food, right? And that's how we need to keep eating in order to stay alive. But it's more complicated than that, actually, if you want to go to the next slide. So in addition to eating for survival, we know that not all food is the same, right? So when we eat foods that are unnaturally high in sugar, carbs, fat, salt, and even artificial sweeteners, there's a different kind of response in our brain than when we eat other foods that are more healthy. So our reward center gives us a magnified response, so almost like a feel-good surge. And this can actually give us physiological temporary relief or shifting of our mood to ease our stress. So that's the reason why we don't just pick any food oftentimes, but especially when we're under stress, having anxiety, and we're looking for comfort, we're selecting foods that tend to be those that are the snack type foods or the things that are less healthy. Okay, so sometimes that helps when you have an understanding. And one of my goals for the presentation is to give you a better insight and understanding regarding all of this stuff so that you can not be so hard on yourself. That's what I'm noticing. People are being really hard on themselves. So it's also a complicated issue beyond the physiology part because we have long-standing associations and memories with particular foods. Right? We all have foods that we eat in certain situations. We eat them with certain people, you know, etc. When we're looking to feel better, we might be drawn to certain foods that have memories associated with comfort. So like grandma's mac and cheese or mom's apple pie or things such as that. So we're looking to those foods not only because of how they taste, but because of the memories tied to them, to those particular foods. And in fact, food memories are actually encoded in our brain in a different sort of a way, if you will, meaning that they're more resistant to going away. You know, food memories are very strong. And so if you think about this is also to do with survival. If you and I are out picking berries in the woods and I eat berries and die from them, you want to have a really strong memory that lasts with you of what those berries looked like, where they were found, what they smelled like, etc. So this is why memories associated with are stored differently and they're less able to be changed over time. So this is why we have a hard time breaking some of those, especially childhood associations with food. And it tends to evoke all of our senses. Now, one of the most important things that you're going to hear me saying tonight is this right here. I really want people to think about this. Be forgiving of yourself. This is not a great time to have weight loss as a goal. I've been telling people, don't even get on the scale. You know, if you want to set a goal of eating healthy, that might be appropriate. But trying to lose weight during this is probably just creating more stress for yourself. And, you know, we do need comfort. That it's going to happen. Emotional eating is inevitable. If we want to flip to the next slide. So it's going to happen. And what I hope that you get out of this presentation is understanding really about how forgiving yourself can be a useful tool. So by saying forgive yourself, I don't mean that it's a pass to engage in emotional eating, or I'm not saying, you know, this is permission to do so, but that if it does happen, it is important to understand it, what the triggers are, to forgive yourself when it happens, and try to avoid getting caught up in the emotional eating cycle, which is on our next slide that we're going to talk about. Okay, so I want you to think about, as I'm describing this, after we're finished, I'm going to ask you if you can relate to this. So think about it. In this case, we're talking about stress and the trigger as being the pandemic and all those associated stressors we talked about. And then the next part to the cycle is reaching for that comfort food. The slide is showing a picture of pizza. For you, it could be the dessert, it could be the snack food at night, it could be any type of food that you falls into that category for you. Again, you know, it's going to tend to be things that are high in sugar, fat, salt, or carbs. But for different people, the particular food is going to be different because of all of those, not only our taste preferences, but also our past associations with those foods. And so then we're going to eat the comfort food. That feel-good hormone is released, as we talked about before. So we have a temporary sense of feeling better, right? And then for many people, not too long after, sometimes as you're, you know, especially when you're trying to change this cycle, people talk about it occurring simultaneously, that I might be feeling better, but at the same time, I'm having that sense of shame and regret and guilt. And along with those feelings are associated thoughts. And we could do a whole other presentation talking about the thoughts that go along with what happens when we engage in eating foods that we didn't intend to, right? But some of those examples of some of those things might be, what did I do? I can't believe I did that. well, I messed up, I might as well keep going. I'm such a screw up. I'm just a fat slob, or whatever kinds of negative things that you may be telling yourself. And when we engage in those thoughts and those associated feelings, that can then become the stress or the trigger at the beginning of that cycle. So when you look at how this cycle works, that if you imagine if you were able to let it go at the guilt, shame, anger part, how you might be able to prevent the cycle from continuing to happen over and over and over again. So, you know, the reality is once you eat the food, whatever it is, the unintended food, we'll say, then it's done. It's a done deal. So if you're able to let it go, learn from it, and move on, then that can be much more helpful to you in the future, as opposed to continuing to restart the cycle of feeling bad about yourself, now creating a new stressor trigger and then doing it all over again. Okay, so now in our poll, I just want to ask how many people relate to this cycle of emotional eating? Do we have that? There we go. Wow, so we have an overwhelming yes response. And again, not everybody engages in this pattern, but I think most people relate to it when I ask them about it. And you know, so I'm hoping that you can see the value to where the forgiveness part comes into play. And again, these are not normal times, so the triggers and the stressors may be heightened right now. So that's also why people are doing more of this right now. So when you let go of what happened, saying, okay, this happened, I'm going to move on, it allows you the opportunity to be in charge of your choices. So now I can think about and understand what happened. All right, so now if I also have an understanding that the certain foods that I'm choosing are related to a physiological reaction, again, this is not to make an excuse for it or give permission for it, but it helps you understand yourself. Because oftentimes people are saying, I can't believe I keep doing this. I know that I shouldn't be. And it's very powerful. Not only the memories, not only the habit of this cycle and just the habit in general, but you know, just the long-standing patterns for many people. And if it is new for you, that can also be difficult to understand as well. So one of the things that I want to suggest to you is thinking about balance. For me, most things in life, whether we're talking about eating, whether we're talking about our mood or whatever, it all seems to come down to finding the right kind of balance. So my suggestion to you is understand and accept your feelings, you know, understand why you're stressed, whatever, even if we're not talking about COVID times, what are your negative emotions and where are they coming from? Accept them as normal or just a reaction to an event, but try to shift away from the negativity as much as possible. So say, you know, okay, I get it, but I don't have to stay here. I don't have to dwell on the negativity. And a lot of times people have struggles with that. Stay informed, meaning watch the news, watch enough news to stay informed, but give yourself a break. So lots of people that I've talked to are sitting there all day long in some form or another, seeing information about, you know, what has the governor said and what is the, you know, what's happening today here or there, or just on social media where it's all over the place as well. Just find the right balance between staying informed, but also giving yourself a break, doing other things besides listening to COVID stuff. And that also goes for talking about it too. I know just in conversations that I've had with people in my life, a lot of times you just need to move away from talking about it and talk about something else. And then the next one is really important as well. And this, I think, is becoming more important as time goes on, or as things are starting to shift in the world and return to graduated levels of normalcy. Be aware that other people's beliefs and reactions are going to be different from yours, and try to balance, just be aware of it and try not to be so judgmental. And I'm not saying that you all are, but I know a lot of the things that I am hearing reflect on people just not really being sensitive to where other people are coming from. And just keep in mind, be mindful that other people have maybe things that you can't see by looking at them that may impact their decisions, whether that's their past experiences or traumas, or maybe it's their current state of health, or whatever the case may be. Try to be sensitive and respectful. Finding the balance between eating foods that you find comforting, because nothing wrong with that. Again, right, like I was saying before, we're pre-programmed to enjoy food. We're supposed to. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just a matter of keeping it in check. So the balance here would be eating foods that you find comforting, but doing it in a moderate and a controlled way. So, that means that you can have some snack foods or things that you find comforting, or maybe they're not snack foods. For many people, they're regular foods. Sometimes it might just be a matter of the portion. So keep in mind that it's all right to feel comforted by your food. You don't have to feel guilty or ashamed of it. Manage your emotional eating due to stress or boredom, but also allow yourself to have some comfort. So that's pretty much what I was just saying. So the little cartoon here says, why does comfort food always lead to so much discomfort? So this might be referring to emotional discomfort. It may also be referring to physical discomfort if you've overeaten in terms of a portion size. But it doesn't have to. It's, again, if that balance is lost, that's when overdoing it becomes uncomfortable, both emotionally and possibly physically. So how to make the best of things. And you probably heard lots of things in the news. Everyone's offering you strategies of how to deal with stuff right now. So I was just trying to find some things to talk with you about that are more related to food. So keeping a similar sleeping and waking pattern actually does relate to food. So not only is that just good in terms of transitioning back to regular life when it happens, but also for your eating habits. So what I'm hearing a lot of people saying is that they're staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And when you're doing that, guess what? If you had dinner at 6 or 7 at night, you're going to be hungry again if you're staying up that late. So, in many ways, it can be setting you up for this pattern that you might be trying to avoid with the extra snacking or the extra meal or the extra eating. And also, again, if you're waking up late, maybe you wake up at 11 and you say, well, now I've missed breakfast. It's almost lunchtime. So now you're skipping a meal. And that can have some other effects we're going to talk about in a minute. Try eating your meals at the same time as you normally do. This is just going to help you spread out the times you're eating so you can avoid being overly hungry. Also, just again, keeping some sense of normalcy for when things change back. Keep your routines and habits that worked for you regarding eating. I'm hearing lots of people that are saying, well, now that I'm working from home, I don't really have to plan my dinners because I'm there. So the problem with this is that if you could have the best intentions of eating a healthy dinner, cooking a nice meal, but if you don't have the things in your house that you need in order to do that, that is not happening. So that goes in with meal prepping and planning as a good habit. And if that's worked for you, or even if it hasn't, maybe now is a good time to think about starting that. I know that's many people's difficult area, and it's probably the #1 contributor to what I see for people who fall off of healthy eating plans is that they go back to oh, I'm sorry, I'm distracted by a comment that popped up. Is people go back to their you know, they go back to their habits of not prepping and planning is what I'm trying to say. So you want to keep up those routines. Another thing that I hear people saying is that, well, I used to do so well with my eating when I went to work every day because I would pack my lunch, I would have everything that I needed, and then I would eat just what I brought. So there's no reason that you can't still continue doing that. I've had many of my patients do this strategy, and it has worked actually fabulous with working from home. You can still pack your lunch boxes if you're going to work. So if your routine was that you packed your lunch the night before, try doing that. And again, nobody is standing there telling you that you can't eat something else from the pantry. But if you've already prepped and planned and made a sandwich and packed some snacks, you may be much more inclined to eat the things that you brought. Okay, so I think that's a really good strategy. Continue on your exercise plan. What, obviously the gyms are closed, so many people are struggling with that. So what I would suggest is try to do something, especially at the same time when you used to exercise, if it was the beginning of your day or the end of your day, whatever your routine was. The most important piece right now is just maintaining the routine. So even if the intensity level of the exercise is less, maintaining the routine is going to help you in the long run. Also be cognizant that even if you were not a gym goer, that your at-home routine is probably much less active than your routine was when you were in the office. I know that mine is, even though my job is relatively inactive, I was still getting up in between patients and walking them to and from the waiting room. So now, before I noticed it, I was sitting there for 4 or 5 hours straight, went to get up and, felt like I had just driven in the car for, halfway to Florida or something like that. So you want to, there's a lot of different tips and tricks for this. You can YouTube some chair exercises or office kind of exercises. And if you are just staying in your seat, but you can also make a conscious effort to just be a little bit more active when you're home, even if it's, if you're not comfortable going outside. If you are, certainly the weather's getting nicer to be able to do that. But even if you want to do things inside and they're not formal exercise routines, even if you use your stairs, or even if you are looking at your phone or something like that, or watching Netflix on your device, you can be walking as you're doing that. And that might be a way to, kind of maintain that same level. And also, of course, doing things other than, we can't do all those non-food activities that we love, but maybe there are some where we can create some new things for ourselves as well. But make sure that you're finding, again, that balance. And do not skip meals. This is so important. I think especially when people are engaging in the emotional eating cycle, they may be susceptible to this. Something that we call the eat, repent, repeat is the emotional eating cycle. But then there's like this, in the repenting stage, is the skipping the meals, right? So when you're feeling bad about yourself for having engaged in some unplanned or unwanted eating, you may have the urge to then say, oh, I did so bad last night that I shouldn't eat breakfast or I shouldn't eat lunch today. And there's tons and tons of good reasons not to do that. But for the purpose of our presentation, I want to talk about how this can actually contribute to overeating episodes in the future. So the number one reason for people that I see coming into my office who are over snacking, overeating, binging, is that they've engaged in some sort of pattern of restriction before that, earlier in the day. And this is why the nighttime thing is often the common time frame in which the overeating occurs, is because people have been very restricted throughout the day. And then at night, we're less distracted. It's most people's downtime. And that's when we can, we might be overly starving at this point. And then once you start, it's hard to shut it down. So eating 3 meals throughout the day will help you with that, supplementing with healthy snacks in between. And I also wanted to just talk for a second about the gut-brain connection. So when you're eating healthy foods, you're really helping also to maintain your mental health. So the gut is often referred to as the second brain. And by that, we mean that many, or actually in fact 80% of the receptors for mood are produced in our gut. So when we need healthy food in order to make that happen. So when we're eating the junkier stuff, where you may notice that how you feel afterward is you're not feeling as well mentally either. You might feel a little bit of brain fog or fatigue, things like that. And that really has to do with this gut-brain connection. So be aware that what you're putting into your gut is your fuel for your body. So now I want to talk about staying connected. We all know this. Everybody's saying stay connected during this period of social isolation. But I want to talk about something a little bit different beyond that, related to eating. So actually feeling lonely can be a stressor or a trigger in and of itself that can trigger increased eating. So many people, and sometimes people say, how can I be lonely? I'm in a house full of people. I'm stuck here with all these people. I'd love to be alone. Well, alone and lonely are not the same thing at all. And you can certainly feel lonely even if you're among people. So think about that as well. But loneliness can trigger people to want to eat more. Maybe there's a history of this in a person's past of eating when they were alone, eating secretively. And now if you are having more time that you are alone, there's more opportunity for secretive eating or eating alone. And then what may follow if you're engaging in that kind of emotional eating cycle might be those feelings of shame or guilt about it. And when people feel shame or guilt, that's an isolating kind of feeling, and it tends to further increase social disconnection, as opposed to what we're saying now is we want people to stay connected. We're already, just by inherent to the situation, socially isolated. So we don't want the eating behaviors to contribute to that. Okay. Another important point is shifting away from evaluating foods as good or bad. Again, we could do a whole topic, whole hour talk on this. But so if you think about, just to talk about it quickly, if you're eating something that you consider to be a bad food, let's say it's cookies. So if I eat the cookies, the bad cookies, then what am I because I ate them? You know, so inherent in that is an evaluation and a judgment of yourself. So that is what's really leading to the sense of shame and guilt and contributing to this cycle as well. And also think about avoiding judging other people for their food choices. So just be aware that when you're commenting about something someone else is doing, maybe in your household would probably be the most likely scenario, that you could be eliciting or triggering for them some of that sense of shame and guilt. And again, a lot of these things go back to people's childhood experiences. Many people have grew up in situations where they experienced lots of judgment around food. And not only does our society reinforce the perception of foods as good and bad, but many times our home environment has done that as well. Okay, and this is another one we've probably heard lots about in the news. So talking about it related to food, celebrate being together with people. Maybe you're not always thrilled that you're stuck with the people that you're stuck with. And sometimes, you know, we can be quarantined with people that we are not wanting to be with. You know, I know many people have situations that are not so great with the people that they're stuck together with. But even in those situations, a way of improving the situation could be cooking healthy meals together. You know, it's a time that you can focus on, you have a little bit more time perhaps because you're working from home, you don't have your commute, or maybe you're working a modified schedule, something along those lines. And shared food experiences, again, because we feel good when we eat, this is something that's promoting positivity. We tend to feel connected to people when we eat together, right? Also thinking about practicing food gratitude, thinking about, you know, we're being thankful of what we do have. A lot of times human nature is to focus on things that we don't have and be upset about it. Well, let's shift that a little bit and think about what we do have. It's a good time to experiment with new recipes, a new style of cooking, maybe new ingredients that you wanted to try, also spices. Our brain is looking for novelty, and especially when we have less to do, we're looking for novelty. So you can use your food in that way by trying some new things. Also, I've had a lot of people talk about using spices and just experimenting with things, and that's another good way to introduce some novelty. So sometimes people are living alone, so they're upset by this idea. Everybody's talking about sharing food and cooking together, and I can't do that because I live by myself. Something that I saw, which I thought was great around particularly Easter, Passover time, is people were actually cooking together, but doing it via Zoom or something like that, or sharing food ideas, food experiences, and actually maybe even cooking together. You could do that just remotely, like we are getting together now. So it's just a way of making the best of something that's less than ideal. All right, so here's another important topic that I wanted to talk about. So let's be for real, not all social contact is positive, right? So I'm giving you permission to limit your contact with people who are negative for you, because let's be real, we don't need any more negativity than we already have. Okay, so this may come in the form of seeing other people's social media posts. So I'm telling you that you don't have to feel not obligated to be this super fitness person, a master chef, the best crafter or sewer, or the best teacher out there, parent of the year. And those are great for if people are doing them. And sometimes you might find them even to be inspirational. Maybe one day you're turning on your phone and you're seeing posts of people doing these things. And one day you might say, you know what, this sounds like a really good idea. I should get up and do it. But on another day, you might say, oh my God, maybe I should be doing that too, and feel really bad about it. So I'm interested to hear what our audience has to say about this one, if you are feeling that kind of pressure. And I know that I have experienced that kind of flip-flopping of some days saying, wow, that's a great idea, and other days being like, ugh, just let me not have to look at all this. So in the question, we're calling it be more productive. So that's what I mean by productive is, all of these kind of special pandemic things that people seem to be doing. Okay, so we have some mixed answers here going on. So, again, I think it's a mixed experience. So, maybe there's an age factor here as well. But so I just wanted to address this and talk about it to people because I've heard people saying various things that like, oh, I just feel like I'm so lazy. I should be doing this, that, or the other thing. And it's okay to have a bad day. And it's pretty normal to have some days that are good, some days that are bad. And the longer this goes on, the more that, we're experiencing this sort of flip flop. So I'm giving you permission to just be you in whatever form you want that to be. And also giving you permission to not have to look at everybody else's stuff if you don't feel that that's helpful or positive for you. And there are a lot of positive uses of technology. There's a lot of free stuff, free dance classes, yoga, meditation, all sorts of things, in addition that help you stay connected to people in a positive way. I hear a lot of people talking about doing Zooms with their office staff that they may not be seeing all the time. So that's another good idea. Positive use of the technology and webinars such as this. This allows us to get together and get some information without having to leave our houses. So that's all good stuff. So just some things, I tried to think of some things that are a little different from what we most commonly hear that might help you deal with this time. Writing a handwritten letter. I know my kids were doing this. They were writing letters to their cousins and mailing them through the snail mail. They thought that was like the greatest thing ever. Reaching out to old friends, people that you haven't had time to talk to, but maybe now you do. Being supportive to somebody who needs it, but also in addition to that, maybe asking for support if you need it. You know, and there's a lot of ways you can be supportive. You don't have to be sewing 50 masks a day. You can be supportive to people in other ways. One of the things that my daughter and I talked about doing is we bought the supplies. We're going to make little satchels of lavender for the people that we know who are struggling with anxiety. Lavender has a lot of anxiety reduction benefits. You can sleep with it in your pillow. You can put it in your bathtub. You can actually add it to your tea, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways to be supportive if you're creative. I also heard people who have said, you know, my daughter isn't calling me and I think that she should be, you know, so that might be an example of not asking for support when you need it. And people are very distracted with their own stuff right now, so they may not be thinking about what you need. So you might have to come out and ask for it. Creating not only a bucket list, but maybe also a list of what are you going to do when things open up in the world again and you're able to get out there. Making a list. Adjust your physical environment. This is something a little bit different to think about. How can you make your environment more pleasant to be in? So simple things are sometimes can go a long way with enhancing your mood and making you feel better. That might mean lighting a scented candle. It might mean using, what do you call those? Like scented oils, oil diffusers, things like that to enhance the way your environment smells. Maybe it's cutting fresh flowers from your garden or something along those lines. Anything that you can do that might enhance your environment and make you feel better. Resuming an old hobby or activity, creating music, playlists. Again, music and memories are highly tied together. That can, and sometimes we want to even have a little bit of nostalgia during this time. So thinking about times in the past that we're happy. And sometimes pictures and music can do that for us. So here's just some slogans, I guess we would call them. I love slogans because I feel like they're just quick reminders of things. So I'm just going to run through them and sort of interpret them for you. These are slogans related to food. Each plate is a clean slate. So again, if you are prone towards thinking about, you know, oh, I've already screwed up, so I might as well keep going. I ate badly, let me keep going. Think about each plate as a clean slate. It's a new opportunity to eat healthy again the next time. Don't let yesterday take up too much of today. So what's in the past is the past. Forgive yourself, move on, learn from it. Be where your feet are. I love this one because it's keeping you mindful and in the present. Even if the present isn't the most appealing at the very moment, it's better than flashing forward to the future where we have all these unknowns and we can possibly, you know, catastrophize and, you know, try to, and actually make us feel more anxious rather than keeping us focused in the present is good for anxiety reduction. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So I like this slogan. In fact, it's in the office behind me somewhere where you're looking right now. And what that means is sometimes we learn from stuff that's hard. So just because something is difficult doesn't mean that there is not a life lesson there. Healthy food improves my mood. Again, that's referring to that gut-brain connection. And the next one, your stomach is not a wastebasket. So many people that I speak with talk about eating something because they don't want to throw it away or waste it. And especially You know, food scarcity is an issue for some people, feeling afraid, am I going to get what I need? So we don't want to waste. However, if you're full and you don't need the food, and it's not something that's healthy or going to feel good for your body, or it may trigger that sense of feeling guilty or ashamed, then it's better off in the trash can. So you really can throw food away, and you are not the trash can, so it doesn't have to go into your mouth. So that's an important one. Hustle to gain more muscle. This slogan is referring to just about doing your everyday things, maybe with a little more oomph in them, and that can help you. Too fit to quit. This is again about not losing those that progress that you've made in your fitness goals. So keeping up your routines. Okay. So managing your mindset is really kind of the bottom line. So maintaining our mental health, optimizing our physical health, it comes down to managing our mindset. And this is how we're going to promote healthy feelings and behaviors. So, you know, just thinking of a way to shift your mindset. If you're feeling a sense of panic, try to think of having patience, feeling at peace, something that's a flip side or alternative to that. If you're feeling fear, try to shift towards thinking of forgiveness. Forgiveness in this sense, I'm meaning it as if you've eaten in response to anxiety. Have faith that things eventually are going to return to some sense of normalcy, whatever that's going to be for us in the future. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about Virtua's programs and my work there, if you were interested in meeting with someone like myself or one of our other team members, I want to just tell you what I do. So I work as part of our medical weight loss program, which is a comprehensive program. So I'm part of a team that includes dietitians that provide nutritional counseling, and we also have a physician who helps monitor you in terms of the physical health as well. And and then I work obviously with the behavioral health piece, so topics of behavior change and stuff like we're talking about in tonight's presentation. I also work within our surgical weight loss program, so that's bariatric surgery. And again, there we also have a comprehensive team of people. So that's what we do at Virtue is we're trying to look at you as the whole person, and that, you know, considering your body, your mind, and also your physical health and how it all interplays together. Okay, so the contact info is there if that is something that you might want to pursue.
Okay. Hello. That was wonderful. Can you hear me now, Dr. Hunt?
I can. You're a little crackly, but I hear you.
Okay. Well, that was such good information. We have some great questions from our participants as well. So let's jump into just a few of those. I know we got started a little bit late, but we got some great questions. So I do want to make sure we have time to get to them. And just a reminder, we will be sharing the recording of tonight's session. You'll be receiving an email, and we have a few more of these great RealTalk sessions planned, and I'll tell you a little bit more at the end about those. So let's get started with one of our questions. So can emotional, no, let's start with this one, I'm sorry. So what do you do when you are eating right and the weight isn't coming off? And how do you, it's very upsetting. How do you not give up when you feel like you're eating the right way and you're still not losing weight?
Yeah, well, this is, I'm sure many people out there are struggling with this question. It's something, probably the most common thing that we hear in medical weight loss and actually surgical weight loss as well. And it's a complicated answer. It's a complicated situation because it's not all about your behavior and what you're doing. There's so many factors and variables that go into weight loss. And really the focus of all of our programs, or in particular the medical weight loss program,
obviously with surgery, we're focusing on, large amounts of weight loss. But in medical weight loss, we're looking at moving you away from really focusing so much on the scale. And a nice side effect of eating healthy and learning about your body and your food is that oftentimes the scale does move, but sometimes it doesn't. And then it may be more something physiological going on that's contributing. It's really complicated. And this is why we have a physician that's also with our program as well. Sometimes there are underlying things, metabolic, that maybe you haven't considered before. But it is, I think in the end, if you're eating healthy, then maybe it's where you're supposed to be. And maybe acceptance is more of something to be working on as well. Because you have to remember, there's all different shapes and sizes of bodies in the world. And that's okay too. And, so I guess my answer is, like most answers, it's complicated.
Yes, it is. Well, how about this question? So emotional eating, can it also be more of a habit than tied to emotion? And how do you break the habit?
Mm-hmm. Again, complex answer. And this is really different for different people. And I'm sure not anyone who does emotional eating that doesn't have some bit of a habit that's going into it, unless it's an isolated incident. There's so many different kinds of strategies. It really just depends on what your whole pattern is. And these are the kinds of things that we address in the programs because they are so individualized. That's why it's important to meet one-on-one a lot of times talking about these things. But I think just in general, habit, again, is something you have to think about. We have neural pathways in our brain that keep us doing the same thing over and over again without much attention or thought to it. And eating is just one of those things that very easily goes on autopilot. So because eating is on autopilot, we often engage in things repeatedly. And again, like I was saying in the beginning, that there's also, we've rehearsed these things so many times, they're just really ingrained. And it also makes it difficult to change. So I'm probably not fully answering that question, but hopefully that helped a little bit.
Do you have any advice for the snacking after dinner time period? I feel like that's always when I fall off the wagon. I do great all day, and then it's that nighttime, and then I feel guilty. And I think we have, some questions about that too. So, any advice for that end of day?
Well, again, as I was mentioning, sometimes that can be precipitated by the way that you ate during the day. Not always, but it's something to take a look at, how you're eating during the day. And especially people who are watching their weight or dieting, this is one way it can backfire on you, is if you've eaten too few calories during the day, you may be inclined to overeat at night. Also, when we are tired, that can do a few things. It can lower our inhibitions and our attention to our snacking behavior. So many people are successful all day long with curbing that because they're really closely paying attention to it. But in the evening time, you're tired. Maybe it's the first time that you sat down. And this is another contributor, is that we pair relaxation and eating together. So that's where it's also a habit, is that we paired. This is what we do every night. Maybe for a lot of women that I speak with, they talk about everybody goes to bed and their relaxation is the first time they're by themselves all day and they're sitting down with a bag of chips and watching TV or whatever the case may be, and it just goes together. And so it's part of the relaxation. I hope that makes sense. So paying attention to it can be useful. Obviously, if you're not paying attention to something that's nearly impossible to change, sometimes it's just going to bed sooner, if you notice. There is another strategy that we often talk about is the acronym of HALT. So if you think about the word HALT and think about it's to help you remember the strategy that corresponds with it. So this is a good strategy for asking yourself some questions to assess whether you should eat or not. You know, to think about, am I really hungry? Because oftentimes people are going for the snack because of habit, because of emotions, and they're not really hungry. So if you're not really hungry, then eating is not going to really satisfy your need at that point. So that can be a useful question. The A refers to anger or anxiety. Those are common emotional triggers. So you can kind of assess what's going on with my emotions. And then the L refers to, am I lonely? Am I just looking for food as maybe my friend or company at this point in time? And then the T is, am I really tired? And also when we are ready for bed, we're also releasing hormones that can stimulate the sensation of hunger. In fact, it's the same hormones that we release when we actually are hungry. So we can kind of get confused about that.
Okay. What do you think?
That might be helpful.
It's very helpful. And what do you think about eating 3 meals between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and no eating for the 16-hour period of, the overnight period, the 5 p.m. to the 9 a.m.? I know there are some meal plans that recommend that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that really depends on the individual. I think just to speak generally about it, the best kind of eating plan is eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And, skipping meals and going long periods of time without eating can be problematic for many people, again, triggering that sense of being overly hungry. Because so think about it, if you're never eating anything past 5 p.m., there's probably times in which you might be hungry. We have a tendency to get hungry again after about 4 hours. So come 9 o'clock, if you're still awake, you're likely to be hungry. So those kinds of rules around eating become hard to follow and often contribute to why people fall off of a particular diet plan. And then when that happens, you feel like you failed and all sorts of other associated negative stuff. So I think just as a general rule, eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full is the best way to eat. And then, if you having too many rules is I think just in general is a simplistic way of answering that.
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
I know we got started a little bit late, so I appreciate everyone that's hanging in there. This has been really great information. So the one question is about sugar cravings and wanting chocolate. Does this increase during menopause? Is that normal in non-stressful situations?
Well, our hormones are very much tied to our food and our cravings, so that certainly can happen for some people. But I also think another complicated factor there is that we have this kind of cultural notion of being hungry or snacking more or eating more around certain lifetimes, whether that would be perimenopausal, during menopause, premenstrual. And, so I think that can also play a role. So for some people, there for sure can be a physiological thing going on. But again, so my suggestion would be if you feel like having a piece of chocolate, then you should have a piece of chocolate. And if you're doing that every day in a moderate kind of a way, if you feel like having it, then it's not going to be a problem for you. It's only a problem if you are overdoing it or using it consistently as a way of coping. But there's nothing wrong with eating a piece of chocolate. So again, if we move away from thinking of chocolate as bad, then you can have a piece of chocolate here or there.
Sure. So our last question, and I'm not sure if it's something that you're able to answer in general terms, but I'll ask it. So
okay.
Our participant says, I seem to be afraid to lose weight. How can I fix this? And also a follow-up question is, how do you tell when you are full?
So, again, these are not short answer questions. And many people have not really learned how to tune into their hunger and fullness. And one of the reasons for that might be because they're eating too frequently. So they're maybe not allowing themselves to experience those sensations. Also, defining fullness, it can be a problem for some people. Some people are defining fullness as being overly stuffed. You know, again, these are things like within our programs that we educate our patients about. And that's why we have, I don't think I mentioned that we have group sessions and things like that, where we talk about these kinds of topics, because there's so much to know about how our bodies work. And much of it applies to everyone, but there's also these nuances that we're talking about that are really individual to people based on their past experiences with eating. I kind of forget the first part to that question, but
it was sort of a fear of losing weight.
So, you know, again, I'm sure that would definitely be something to explore as an individual, but there might be, you know, a lot of times something common that I've heard with people who are fearful of losing weight is that comes with expectations, you know, and sometimes people have had that experience that they've lost weight and then they've regained it, and that comes with disappointment, failure, and a lot of other kinds of negative feelings or feedback from others in your environment that a person may be wanting to avoid. So if, you know, if this listener has had those kinds of experiences, perhaps that expectation piece may be playing a role because of not wanting to, you know, have the maybe what has been in the past an inevitable regain or something like that.
Sure. So that might be a good opportunity to schedule an appointment and meet with.
Yeah, well, that would be, you know, something definitely that falls under the behavioral health component of the programs for sure.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have learned a lot during this session. I thank everyone for joining. I really, again, want to just congratulate you, for all of our participants, for joining us tonight and taking this time to invest in yourself and in your health and even in your family's health, because I think the things we learn in these sessions help us in sharing with the people that we love. So you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording from tonight's session. If you would like to join our next Virtua Health Real Talk Women's Health Chat, it's scheduled for next Thursday, and the topic is, can a powerful pelvic floor change your life? We have a celebrity host for the next week's session, so be sure to register if you haven't already. You can go to virtua.org/realtalk, and please invite a friend to join us, share it on Facebook. I think we've worked out some of our kinks, our technical kinks, I hope, and we'll be ready to roll again on next Thursday. So thank you very much, and be well, everyone.